Okay. Bo mine Rabbi Zera Meirav Sheshes. So continuing to discuss if you do an Aveira at different times before you get appointed, what's the halacha? So it says Rabbi Zera from the Yasuf Sheshes. Achal safek chelev. So we know that if you eat something which is in a doubtful status, forbidden fat, which is a doubtful, you're not sure if it's forbidden fat or not, that would make one liable to bring a asham talui. Achal safek chelev kishuhu hedyoit v'nismane v'noidalon. Let's say you ate safek chelev and then kishuhu hedyoit, when you were a commoner, a regular guy, v'nismane, and then you were appointed to be king. And then you were known, it was known to you that you committed this Aveira. It says the Gemara, just to remind ourselves, there's two opinions. Do you go after when he sinned, or do you go after when he found out about it? So, according to the rabbis that say, you always go after the point where he committed the Aveira. I don't have a question because he committed an Aveira when he was a commoner. So just like a commoner, if he would do it, he would bring an Asham Talui. This person would also now bring an Asham Talui, this special guilt offering you bring for doubtful Aveiros, even though he's now been appointed the king. But you always go after the time of the sin. So, Ella Kiti Bailach Alib Reb Shimon. We're asking according to Reb Shimon. According to Reb Shimon, who needs both two factors, the Aveira and the knowledge that you did something wrong. So, the Ishtani Levadai, Ishtani L'Safik, maybe if it was a regular offering, a sin offering, so then your appointment to power would definitely change your obligation. You would no longer be liable to bring an offering because you only found out about the Aveira now that you became a king. And yet Reb Shimon says this is going to exempt you. You have to know about it at the same status that you were when you actually did it. So says the Gemara, it should be the same thing for a suffix. What should be the difference? If you find out about it now when you're in a different state, you're a different status, so then you should be exempt from bringing the offering. But maybe not. Oh, Dilma, ki ishtani levada ishtani korban dideh. There's another factor by a regular korban, a regular sin offering, when the offering you bring as a commoner and the offering you bring as a king are different. So that's where Reb Shimon said that if you're a commoner and then you get appointed and then you realize that you did something wrong as a commoner, since the offering is going to be a different offering, therefore you are going to be exempt. Aval hacha, by the asham talui, we don't find that a king is required to bring a different asham talui than a commoner. So since we don't find that by an asham talui, so what would Reb Shimon say in this case? To that we say teku. We're not sure. Would he say the same thing by asham talui or not? Okay, so until now, basically yesterday and just now, we really finished off talking about that when the Torah says by sin offerings, me'am haaretz, from the regular commoner, it came to exclude a Kohen Gadol and a king. That was really yesterday and a little bit today. But now we're going to discuss that verse also comes to exempt an apostate. Apostate, someone who threw off his Judaism. Interestingly enough, he's also exempt from bringing a sin offering. And now we're going to get involved in the difference between him and the Tzeduki, a Sadducee. There are different halachic differences. I think if one writes a Sefer Torah, different differences in halacha between them. But how this all going to play out and who qualifies to be who, how do you, what class do you have to take to become an apostate or a Sadducee? So what requirements do you need? Good morning. That's going to come up right now. Tana Rabbanan says the Bryce, from Miyama Aretz, a commoner, bringing a sin offering is only a commoner, coming to exclude Prat Lamumar, coming to exclude an apostate. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, Asher Lo Yisa'asen B'Shgogo V'Ashem. Really should see the end of the verse. No, that is the end of the verse. But it says that one does an Aveira, and then they're guilty of it, meaning they realize what they did is wrong. So it says the Gemara, Hashev B'Yidiyaso may be Korban al Shagagoso. Someone who returns from his knowledge, meaning you had a knowledge that if you would be you did an Aveira inadvertently. If you would have been told this is an Aveira, you would have abstained. When you did it inadvertently, you bring a sacrifice. However, somebody who, even if they're told, by the way, this is an Aveira, this is forbidden fast, you would go, I don't care. So such a person, even when done inadvertently, does not bring a chatos. So in our world, we'll say a guy makes an honest mistake, but a guy who would do it anyways, regardless if it's a mistake or not, so that guy does not bring a chatos. Maybe korban al shagaso, Aino maybe korban al shagaso, my beinayu. What's the difference between these two opinions? The Tanakama says a mumar is excluded, and Reb Shimon says only somebody who would return if you told them that it's wrong, only he brings in an inadvertent offer. We're going to offer a few suggestions. Amar of Hamnuna, mumar lechol chelev, umayvi korban al hadam ikebenayu. So we're talking about somebody who's a mumar lechol chelev. He's an apostate who eats forbidden fats. Umayvi korban al hadam. But now he did something wrong regarding blood, meaning he ended up inadvertently eating forbidden blood, or eating forbidden blood. So that's the difference between these two opinions. Let's see. Mar savar kaven de mumar lachol chelev ledam nami mumar have. One opinion says, since you're a mumar par chelev, you are a mumar, period. That was the first opinion, Tanakama. Umar and Rabbi Shimon says, ledam mihashav b'yid yasahu. He said, at the end of the day, you're only somebody who's only an apostate for chelev. You're not a rebellious against the rest of them. You're just rebellious against forbidden fats. But when it comes to blood, very possible that if you were told, this blood is forbidden, you would abstain. So therefore, you're still shaykh. You still have a connection to bring a sin offering. Okay, that is the opinion of Rav Hamnuna. Rava argues and says anybody who's a mumar lechol chelev is for sure not a mumar for blood. Meaning he argues anybody who, just because you're an apostate for one area, does not make you an apostate for another area. So everyone's going to agree if you eat or drink the blood inadvertently, for sure you bring a sin offering. Here's an interesting case. Somebody eats non-shechted meat for their enjoyment. They just like McDonald's, period. And now what happened, he's going, so instead of eating the nevela, it got swapped. His wife gave him, instead of nevela, she gave him shuma. So the achlu. And now they ate it. So this is going to be the machlokas. On the one hand, you eat a nevela, you would eat it anyways. But in this case, there's an element of inadvertence because it got swapped. So how do you view that? Marsaver came and let you have an achil b'mezid mumarhu. Since you eat chela for your own enjoyment, so advertently, you're considered a mumar. Nothing doing, you're considered a mumar, and there's no sin offering that you can bring. Umar saver, the Rabbi Shimon holds, the ilu eshkach, the hetera, lo achal, lo achal. So therefore, the isur lav mumarhu. So he holds that if he would have kosher meat, he would eat it. He's happy to eat kosher meat. He just happens to enjoy forbidden fats. But if you give him something else that's yummy, he'll eat that too. And therefore, we don't view him. We don't necessarily view him as a mumar. And therefore, in the case that it got swapped for permitted fats, and he ate it inadvertently, so there's still an element of inadvertence, and therefore he will bring a sin offering. Tanu Rabbanan, more about apostates. Chelev zehu mumar. One who eats chelev is considered a mumar, ve'ezu mumar. So this is obviously not going to make sense. We'll get back to this. But one who eats chelev is an apostate. And who's an apostate? One who eats much more than that. Nevelos, v'treifos, shkatzim, v'ramasim. One who eats nevelos, the carcasses, and non-kosher meat, and creepy crawlies and insects. V'shasi yayin nesech, throw that in too. And he drinks yayin nesech. That's a mumar. So we'll get back to that. Is it chelev or is it not chelev? Okay, we'll see. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af haloidesh kilayim. Even someone who wears kilayim. I don't really understand Um, I mean, why can't it be anything that a person does advertently? You're called a mummer. I don't get, like, even one who wears kilayim, okay, unless they're giving examples of things that a person just does out of enjoyment. And a guy wants to wear something that's very warm. So maybe it's saying that even a guy does it for enjoyment and not in a rebellious way, but he's still doing it on purpose. Maybe that's considered, I don't know. No, Rashi says the opposite of me. Rashi says that these are things that a person is naturally disgusted by, meaning treifa, shkatzim, ramatsim. Nobody wants to eat your creepy crawlers, right? So since a person is naturally disgusted by that, and a person eats it anyway, that shows you that he's obviously angry towards God. He's obviously in a apostate. Yeah, okay. So I guess obviously if you know that a person is doing something that's an aveira, he doesn't care, I think he'll also be a mummer. It sounds like we're talking about somebody that you don't know, but you see him eating consistently, whatever it is, spiders, worms, ants. What are you doing? Elamai, you hate God. Oh, and apparently even someone who wears kilayim, like, how does that fit into the mix exactly? Like, what kilayim could be super comfortable to wear. Your best suit could be kilayim. Okay, so yeah, I'm not sure exactly how kilayim, but it's in. But yeah. Okay, fine. Either way. So Amar Mar Achal Chelev Zeu Mumar. One who eats Chelev is a mumar, is an apostate. Veizu mumar, and who's a mumar? No, Ochel Nevel is one who eats all these non-kosher meat, all the carcasses and the creepy crawlies and the insects. So says our my comer. This is a mumar. That's not a mumar. What are you saying? So Amar Rav Barchan Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rav Barchan and Rabbi Yochanan. How come Achal Chelev Teyavon? Raise a mumar. So one who eats Chelev just out of enjoyment. So you could have thought that's not considered an apostate. No, a guy has what we call a taiva. He has he has an excitement. He eats a harper or Caleb. No, if someone does that, they're called a mummer. So even if you eat it l'teyavo and out of enjoyment, you just love it. It's your grandmother's favorite recipe. At the end of the day, it's forbidden fast, so you're considered an apostate. So someone who's rebelling against God and threw off his Judaism. Lahachis. Let's say you eat it because you don't like it. It's the lady you hate's favorite recipe. You would never eat it in a million years. However, you do it anyways, just to spite God. So Harei Zu Tzeduki. This is considered a Sadducee. This is considered a Tzeduki, and there are different halachic ramifications between a Tzeduki and a apostate. This is an interesting example, by the way, that our print put in Tzeduki, but there's a number of things that were censored when the Gemara was printed. Nowadays, in the newer Gemaras, they put on the side what really it's supposed to be. Really supposed to be here is a min. A min is a heretic. Often the word min is removed from the text. They're worried that that they would see, like, all the Gemaras about Jesus were also, a lot of them were omitted. So here they put in the word Tzeduki, a Sadducee, but which usually refers to somebody who denies the oral Torah. What it really means is someone who's like who's a heretic, who's someone who we're worried is doing idolatrous things. Either way, the Ezu Mumar, we'll go with the translation in front of us, but the Ezu Mumar, who is an apostate. So the Ezu Mumar, Dibistamo, the Ezu Mumar, who's a Mumar, Dibistamo Tzduki Have. A cryptic sentence. The Ezu Mumar, who's a Mumar, the Bestama Tzuki. You can assume the guy that's an apostate was Mistama. You can assume he was at Tzduki Have. The Bestama Tzuki. Yeah, is that what it is? He's typically at Tzduki. Okay, typically, that's a good word. So, okay. So, Omer, he says, okay. Suki Have Omer Ochel Nevela, V'Trei V'Shkatzim, V'Ramasim, V'Shasa Yayin Nasa. That's the first opinion. Someone who eats all these things, so you can assume that he is was initially a tzduki. Okay. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Af Halobish Kilayim. Even somebody who wears kilayim, who wears the forbidden mixture, wool and linen. So my binayu. So what's the difference? Binayu kilayim. The difference is kilayim. Kilayim derabanan. Sorry. a rabbinic prohibition of kilayim. So you have a biblical prohibition of kilayim, and you have a rabbinic prohibition of kilayim. Mar Savar, one opinion holds me deraisa have a mummer. At the end, he's a mummer. Biblically, he's a mummer, even though somebody who's wearing rabbinic kilayim, but biblically he's considered a mummer. The Rabbanon, sorry. Igimanai kilayim the Rabbanon. Mar Savar me deraisa have a mummer. The Rabbanon lo have a mummer. Umar Savar kilayim came into mefarsi misurei afilu me the Rabbanon have a mummer. Sorry. The first opinion says that only biblical kilayim, only biblical things will render you an apostate. Rabbinical prohibitions will not render you an apostate. The other opinion said that even things that are rabbinic, but since it's well known that kilayim, something which is prohibited, that also renders you an apostate, which is interesting. This is a new factor. This is no longer we care about the act itself, but even an act that's well known to be prohibited, where you can't say, "Oh, I didn't know about it." That still renders somebody a apostate according to this opinion. Ravina argue and they say, one says if you rebel out of pleasure, you just really like that sandwich, that cheeseburger, that's called a mumar. But if you do it out of anger, you want to rebel against God. So the hachis, that's called a tzeduki, that's called a sadducee. The chadamar lahachis, now a mumar. Someone says no. A mumar is someone who, even out of anger, you're still considered a mumar. You're not considered a tzeduki. Well, then what is a tzeduki? El ezu tzeduki kol ha'obed avodas chachamim. Anybody who serves idols is considered a tzeduki, which, like I said earlier, really called a sadducee. Seems much more like someone who's a heretic, who really, someone who goes to other religions. Okay, meisve. Let's bring a kasha. Achol parush. Echad o yotush echad. One's a mosquito, and one's a cousin of a mosquito. So, achol parush echad o yotush echad. Harezeh mumar. That is considered a mumar. That is someone who's considered an apostate. Obviously, eating these kinds of mosquitoes and bugs, you're only doing it out of a state of rebellion. No one enjoys that. So, Hasam de Amar, Etom Tam de Isura. Says, no, there you're just saying you want to eat it because you want to taste what does prohibited food taste like. That's all. So you're not really doing it out of rebellion. You're doing it out of curiosity to see what does non-kosher mosquito, what does a mosquito taste like? That's going to be still considered a mumar. It's still considered doing it out of pleasure and not out of anger. Okay, so the Mishnah told us what is a nasi. It said it's a king. So let's see more about that. Nasi, it says nasi. You could have thought what it meant was a prince, meaning a leader of one of the tribes, of one of the 12 tribes. Nasi Shevet, Kenachshon ben Aminadab. I'm not sure why you need an example of what a Nasi of a Shevet is, but the Gemara gives an example, like Nachshon ben Aminadab, one went into the Yamsuf first. So maybe that's what Nasi would have meant. Talmud Lomar, the Mishnah tells us, Mikol mitzvahs Hashem Eloi Kav. All the mitzvahs Hashem is God. Ulahalan hu oimer le'an yilmad le'kira Hashem Elokecha. That was from a few weeks ago. Parsha Shoftim about the king. The king has to, he always has a Sefer Torah on him. He has to always be reading it in order to fear God. Turning the page, just like a king only has one ruler on top of him, and that is God. So to a nasi is somebody who only has, the nasi has to be somebody who only has one ruler on top of him also, which is God, and therefore the nasi in our Mishnah is referring to a king and not referring to a tribal leader. Rebbe asked Rabbi Chia, what about me? I'm the ruler of the Jews in Israel. So I'm not an official king, but I'm the head of the Jewish people. I also only have one ruler on top of me. So would I be considered, if the base Hamikdash was around, would I bring the same offering as a Jewish king? Would I bring a seir, this male offering that a king brings when he does something inadvertently? You're Taraska, your foe, but yeah, there's someone else in Babel that you gotta answer to. Rosh Gola and Babel. Sounds like he's on top of you. So you really have somebody in Babel. In Israel, you're the last say. You're right. And at the end of the day, for the whole Jewish people, you got to deal with the guy in Babel, and the guy in Babel has the last say. So therefore, Therefore, you would not bring that offering.
Just the bubble.
What did you say?
Just the bubble head.
The bubblehead. Yeah, very good. Where's Charles? The bubblehead. Yeah, the bubblehead. Okay. So, Esven, let's bring a kasha. Malche Yisrael u'Malche Beis David. Okay, so now, so the kingdom got split, and you really have two kings, Malchus Yisrael, Malchus Beis David. So, Elu Meivin la'atzman, the Elu Meivin la'atzman. So, each one brings their own sacrifice. They're the kings. They rule their own area. And you see that they bring their own sacrifices. So maybe Rabbi also, he rules Israel, he rules Babel. What's the difference? I'm like Hassam, like Kati Adadi, Hakan and Kati the two. At the end of the day, the Malchi Israel, Malchi Beis David don't have to answer to each other. They rule their own thing independently. Therefore, they can bring their own offerings like kings would. But in Babel and Eretz Yisrael still has to answer to Babel, and therefore you can't really do what you want. So therefore, you would not bring that offering. Rav Safra Masni Halki, Rabbi Safra had a different version. Rabbi asked Rabbi, "You going to the seir? Me, can I bring a seir?" So that question is the same, but his answer is going to be different. Amar lei, no. Hasam shevet hacha mechokek. It depends if you're if you're the head of a shevet, a tribe, or a mechokek. The word literally chokek is to carve in, but here it means a teacher. A legislator. Pull that out. Okay. A legislator. Okay. I guess he has still somewhat of rulership status, but different than the head of a tribe. Let's see. The Brisa says, Lo Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda. I believe this partial is my yeah. Lo Yasser Shevet Yehuda. The tribe, meaning the kings really, could never leave Yehuda. I believe the Ramban here is the one that criticizes the Hashmonayim during Hanukkah for usurping. Is it here? Okay, never mind. But Lo Yasher Sheva Yehuda, Zer Rosh Gola. This is referring to the head of the exile, Shebebavel. Sherod Es Yisrael b'Makel. He rules them with the stick. Umechokek miben Raglav, someone who legislates from between their legs. What does that mean? Elu b'nei banim shel Hillel, shemalamdim Torah l'Yisrael b'Radim. It's referring to somebody who teaches Torah to the masses. So the mechokek is really someone of knowledge. He's a knowledgeable person, but he's not a shevet. So therefore, he tells Rebbe that that you are really a mechokek. You're really the teacher, not the leader, and therefore you would not bring that offering. Okay, fine. So that was all about the king. Nasi means king. Only Hashem's above him. Now we're going to get involved in the Kohen Gadol, who's called the Anointed One. And there's going to be, I think, a lot of interesting things about the oil that he gets anointed with. That's going to be interesting. There's special oil that we'll see more about. The Moshe Rabbeinu made, called the special anointing oil. And a king has to be anointed. Kohen Gadol has to be anointed with that oil. So the Ezo Mashiach, HaMashuach, B'Shem and Mishcha. Now, the second base of Mikdash, there was no Shem and Mishcha. So that Kohen Gadol was not appointed by the oil. It was only the one who's appointed with the Shem and Mishcha, the one that was in the first base of Mikdash. Everything we're talking about here, an anointed Kohen Gadol, is only somebody who was anointed with the Shem and Mishcha. If he wasn't anointed by the Shem and Mishcha, the rules would not apply to him. He would have he would not have the same requirements as this person that we're talking about. Lo ha meruba b'begadim, not the one who wears more garments. Just a way of referring to the Kohen Gadol in the Second Temple, who was distinguished by the fact that he wore more priestly garments than he wore 8 instead of 4. But he didn't have the anointed oil. That's one. Ein bein kohen ha-meshuach b'shem ha-mishcha l'meruba b'begadim ela par haba al kol ha-mitzvos. So what's the difference between the Kohen Gadol basically of the Second Temple to the First Temple? One that was anointed and one that had extra clothing. Ela par haba al kol ha-mitzvos. This bull that we're talking about, that has to be brought when a mistake is made. So that is only done by the one that's anointed. Yeah, a regular Kohen Gadol, or not regular, a Kohen Gadol who just has more clothing, meaning the one that's around in the Second Temple, if he makes a mistake that either I think he himself does or most of the Jewish people do, he's going to bring a regular sin offering. a female goat, a female sheep. He's not going to bring the special bull. Okay, now what if you have a Kohen Gadol who had to step down? He became impure and then he came back. So the Ein Ben Kohen Mishamish. Mishamish means the one that's currently active. The Kohen Sha'ar, the one that was active. Ela Par Yom Kippurim Asiris Eifa. At the end of the day, there's really no difference between them. It's just who's going to bring the bull on Yom Kippur and the daily offering. The Kohen Gadol would bring a daily flour offering. So the Kohen Mishamish is the one that was Kohen Gadol, stepped down and now came back. Now when he comes back, he's going to bring the bull on Yom Kippur, and his daily offering. The other Kohen Gadol is not going to bring that. It makes sense. He's not really Kohen Gadol anymore. But at the end of the day, whoever is in active service will do all the service of Yom Kippur. That will be the same. Yeah. They're both umitzaven al hapsula. They can only marry a virgin. V'asurim al halmana. They cannot marry a widow. The ena mitamo mikrobeim, and they're not able to be mitame b'krobeim. They cannot impurify themselves. Either they lose one of their relatives. Special halacha by Kohen Gadol that he doesn't stop his service even when a relative is lost. He's expected to be on a much higher level. Velo porim. Both of them cannot grow their hair out. They got haircuts all the time. Velo porim, and they cannot rip their garments. And both of them, whether it's the original Kohen Gadol or the one who's the interim Kohen Gadol, if either of them dies, then the rotzeach, the killer, the murderer, does get released from the cities of refuge, from the Ir HaMikvah. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Brisa, Shemin HaMishkan, She'asa Moshe b'Midbar. How did he make this unbelievable oil that Moshe made in the Midbar? Hayu Sholkim bo es ha'ikarim. He would cook the roots of. So there was basically 72 loads, a whole bunch of Shemin HaMishkan. However, there was thousands and thousands of spices. So what would they do? They would soak it. They would boil it, cook it. That the roots of the spices. They would cook the roots of the spices. They would cook the roots of the spices. Yeah, and that's how. And I guess then they would put the oil and then remove the oil from the roots. I'm sitting in front of me. No. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah. What is that?
They remove the roots.
They would cook the roots in the oil?
And then pull the oil, and then pull the roots out. Okay, go on.
And they would pull the roots out and they wouldn't pull the oil off the roots?
The roots and cut fragrance, the oil, and then remove.
So part of the Shemin Mishcha was to cook it with the roots. Got it. Okay. Thank you. Rabbi Yossi Omer V'alo Lasach Es Ha'ikarim Eino Sofek. Just to do that, that's not going to be enough because there's way more roots than there's oil available. Ela Shorin Es Ha'ikarim b'mayim. You really cook all the roots in water. Umeitzip alav shemen, and then the oil is going to be floating on top. V'koled es hareach. The roots are going to take in. They're going to absorb the smell. The kapcho is, then you're going to right away take off the oil. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, I give you a simple thing. They cooked the roots, and that's it. You tell me a whole long process. I'm telling you, what's wrong with my idea? That there's too many roots and not enough oil? Says Rabbi Yehuda, okay, but there was many miraculous things about the Shemin HaMishkan. So add one more to the list. It was able to cook all of the roots. There's way more roots than there is actual oil available. So the Shemin HaMishkan was only in the beginning Shnei Masar Lugin. There was 12 lugin and 72 eggs. And you know what those 12 lugin was able to do? It anointed the tabernacle, the Mishkan. And all of its vessels. It anointed Aaron and it anointed his children. for all 7 days of inauguration. The kulo kaim, and all of it remained la'asid level. Shinemar Shem and Mishcha's Kodesh Yezeli the Shem and Mishcha is going to be holy and it's going to remain for generations. I did not look this up inside, but I did hear the Maharal talks about that Shem and Mishcha comes from an incredibly holy place. It's outer worldly. Therefore, it doesn't expire. Everything in this world expires. Anything which is bound in this world and is natural has an expiration date. Anything which comes from the other world, from a higher spiritual world, does not have an expiration date. But since this is something which was imbued, it came from a holy place. Shem Mishchash Kodesh, it came from a holy place. And it imbued holiness into the Kohen Gadol, etc., etc. It was something which did not expire and it could last for generations. Okay. Tanya Idach, it says in the Brisa of Vayikach Moshe Hashem and Mishka Vayimashak as a Mishkan, that's Kol Asher Bo, the oil was taken, and the Mishkan, the tabernacle was inaugurated, and all of the vessels were also inaugurated. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, how many miracles says Rabbi Yehuda were done with this oil? From beginning to end, all it had was 12 lugin. And Ra Kama Yore Bolas, look at how much the pot is absorbing. Kama Ikarim Boilim, and how much of the actual spices absorb the oil. The Kama Ha'or Sorif, and how much of the fire burned the oil. And yet, after all that, how much remains of these 12 lugin? Still what happened? Bonim Shak Mishkan, the tabernacle was anointed, the vessels, the Aaron Ubanov, and Aaron and the children, all 7 days of inauguration, the Bonim Kohanim Gedolim, and you anointed with just 12 lugin. The Kohanim Gedolim, the high priest, Malachim, and the kings, Rafilu Kohen Gadol, Bain Kohen Gadol, Kohen Mashiach. And here we get the nitty-gritty details about the Shem and Mishcha. A Kohen Gadol's son who becomes Kohen Gadol needs a new inauguration. He also needs an inauguration. However, a king does not. The Ein Moshchin Melech ben Melech. We're going to see the Gemara is going to ask on all these details. The son of a king inherits it. He does not need a new inauguration. The holiness imbued by a king gets passed down to the child. So now, we're going to a bunch of Jewish kings also for a good review of Malachim Beis for the first time. So why was Shlomo anointed? We just said that the son of a king does not need anointment. So David was his father. He's passing on the kingship. What does he need anointment for? Because Machlokoso shel Adonia, the S, shel Adonia. So basically, we're gonna see now 4 or 5 kings that really there was no need to be anointed because someone else tried to stop the person from taking the throne. Therefore, they anointed him with the oil. Yeah. So in Shlomo's case, it was Adonia. In Yoash's case, Yoash mipnei Atalia. The S Yehoachaz mipnei Yehoyakim. In Yehoachaz's time, it was because of Yehoyakim. He was older than him by 2 years, but also Shem and Kayim. Okay, so he's older by him in 2 years. Therefore, the throne should have gone to the older one. It sounds like there was a machlokas, and therefore they had to use the Shem and the Mishcha to anoint Yehoachaz. The Oso Shemin Kayim La'asid Levo. It will last for the future. Shenamar Shem and Mishchas Kodesh Yazeli the Doro Seichem. The guarantee it will last. Zet Begematria Shnemasar Lugan. By the way, Zet is 7 and 5. It's 12, and the Gematria is 12. That's how the Gemara knew that it was 12 Lugan using the system called Gematria. Now let's go back to each part of this long brisa. When's that one? It's 40, right? No, 30. It's 30. Half an hour earlier. No, then it's 6:30. 6:30. Okay. So I was like, well, we have 20 more minutes. That was great. No, we only have less than 10 more minutes. 9 minutes. Let's try our best. Omar Mark says, Master, but don't worry. If you come back tomorrow, you're going to hear about the signs that we use for Rosh Hashanah. Talk about good timing. Yeah, tomorrow is the Rosh Hashanah Simanim. So, Amar Mar, Vafilu Kohen Gadol ben Kohen Gadol, Kohen Mashiach. How do I know that a Kohen Gadol the son of a Kohen Gadol still needs anointment with this special oil. The Siva Kohen Imashek Tachtav Mibana. It's a Kohen Gadol who's going to be anointed, who's Tachtav Mibana, who's going to be in his place from his children. So the Gemara says it's a very wordy pasuk. Just say the Kohen Mitachtav, the Kohen who replaced him, who takes his place. What's from his children in place of him? So my Kohen Mitachtav Mibana. Just say a Kohen. Sorry, just say the one who, the child who replaces him. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, Hamashiach. Sorry. So what does it mean? My Hamashiach. Kamash Malon, the Miban of the Kohen Gadol. Even Mashiach of the Kohen Gadol, below low have a Kohen Gadol. Is to teach you that the Kohen Gadol is only going to be Kohen Gadol, even though it's his son, if he gets anointed with the special oil. If not. Amar Mar, however, a king, the son of a king, is different. Ein Moshchen Melech ben Melech Minolan, Amar Ravacha bar Yaakov, the Tziv, L'man Yarech Yomin, Al Mamlachto v'Gomer. It says in the verse in Devarim that L'man Yarech Yomin Al Mamlachto, you should extend your days should be long on the throne. Hu ubanav bikar Yisrael, you and your children in the midst of Israel. Says the Gemara, Yerusha Hilachem. This is a inheritance for the king. You and your children. It's an inheritance for you and your children. Going back for a second to the kings, how do you know that a king who has a machlokas, we just had 5 examples, that when they have a machlokas, you do need anointment. The lav kol debayi malka moris malchusa lebane. So doesn't anybody who's a king just pass it on to their children? What do you need the Shem and the Mishcha for? Just it's an inheritance. Amar Papa, Amar Kra, Hu Ubana B'Karav Yisrael. You and your children in the midst of Israel. What does that mean? Very important for coming up holidays. Bisman Shishalom B'Yisrael, Karina Bey Hu Ubana. When there is peace in Israel, then we can refer to it you and your children. It sounds like, I'm not sure exactly, but it sounds like when there is peace in Israel, then we see your child as an extension of you, and he will take over the kingship. When there is no peace in Israel, so we don't see that direct line being passed down. It sounds like maybe because you're biologically a child, but no one sees it that way. So then we don't view it that way, maybe. Not exactly sure. But the having shalom, meaning not argument, is a prerequisite for the kingship being passed down without the necessity of the Shem and the Mishra. So Tana Af Yehu ben Nimshi lo Nimshach Ela mipnei machlakoso shel Yoram. So even Yehu, the son of Nimshi, did not need the Shem and the Mishra. He only needed it because of the machlokas he had with Yoram. So says the Gemara, "V'tepuk le mishum derishanu." Tepuk le mishum derishanu. What really the reason why he should have been anointed was because he was the first of the kings. Yeah, how does it translate it? Rishonu meaning what? His father wasn't the king? Yeah, Rashi says his father was not the king. He was not the son of a king. So that's why he needs anointment. It says no. This is what I mean to say. I mean to say the following. When there was 2 kingdoms, so Malchei Beis David, Meshuchin, Malchei Beis Yisrael, and Meshuchin. The kingship of David and Melech, they need anointment. Malchei Yisrael, and Meshuchin. So they don't need an anointment, and he was the king of the Malchei Beis David, and therefore he would need anointment. So how do I know this distinction is true? Minolan Amar Rava, Amar Cross says the pasuk Kum v'shicheu kizeh, says the verse in Shmuel Aleph, V'yishach le'avyehu v'hu admoni im yafa einayim v'tol rov yomer Hashem Kum v'shacheu kizeh hu. Zeton Mashiach, the one who's from the Malchus Beis David. kingship of David, he needs Mashiach, but ain't Acher Tal Mashiach. But someone else does not need Mashiach. Amar Af Yehu ben Nimshi lo Nimshach Elav Bnei Machos Shal Yuram Umishuma Machos Shal Yuram ben Achav Nimel Meshemen. I don't understand. It's a holy thing. So because someone else is arguing with him, therefore you're going to use holy oil just to prove an argument. Papa, the Afarsim Adachi, they really didn't use the Apil Shem and Mishcha. They actually used the other balsam oil. So too in this case, Papa said somewhere else that they used the balsam oil. So too here, they used the balsam oil. It wasn't really the Shem and Mishcha, but it got the job done that it tried to, I guess, avoid the machokas, or it had to prove that he really was king. Okay, we're going to stop here.
Yashkoach,